Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Hello, welcome everybody. Today I have the pleasure of having Dr. Cesar Lara with me. Dr. Cesar is a medical doctor. He is a board certified bariatric provider. So today we're going to discuss obesity. Obesity is a pandemic on its own. It's global right now, and more people are finding themselves in a very unhealthy pattern. So we have an expert here to discuss that topic with us. Welcome, Dr. Cesar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are grateful that you're here. So let's talk about obesity. Why is it a global phenomenon that feels like it's a runaway train? Why, is there a particular thing that sticks out or stands out to you that this is a problem the way that it is right now?
So if you really get to the cause of obesity, which is what you're bringing attention to, of course, historically, there was always what the experience of a lot of people with excess weight or obesity, what they have experienced is that there is a judgment from the professional world or from the community, which basically says that the reason they're overweight or obese or fat is because they have a inherited personality that prevents them from or limits them from eating the right way, from exercising the right way, from taking care of themselves. So unfortunately, the historical perspective of obesity has been one where people are shaming and blaming the persons with this condition as if there was some limiting perspective within their own persona that is providing that. Of course, nowadays we have come to understand that obesity is actually a disease, no different than diabetes, no different than hypertension. And we do not generally speak, if somebody says, so I take a blood pressure pill, we usually don't say, oh, that means that something's wrong with you. That means that you're not smart enough. That means that, that we're going to shame you because you take a blood pressure pill. Yeah. But unfortunately, in the excess weight or obesity experience, it's so much different, right? And so a lot of people have really been abused, and from the communities, from their own doctors, many times their doctors will say, what's wrong with you? And talk down to them for this condition. As we look into what exactly is where does the root of obesity stem from? It's easy for us to think, well, my grandmother was obese, my mom was obese, my sisters are obese, and therefore I'm obese. And so you could definitely bring attention to maybe there's a genetic predisposition for some people. But outside of that genetic predisposition, which would be a small percentage of individuals that fit that perspective, the reality is the food source. Food source is where we really get to the bottom of where circumstances have come from. And it's easy for us to look at that when we look back to the 1950s. In the 1950s, if you look at pictures of your mother or grandmother, you would find that when she went to grade school, all the kids looked fairly healthy and fairly the same weight. Maybe out of 30 people, you may have found one that looked a little overweight or obese. Today, the picture of our children, if you look at the classes that our children are going to, if you see a picture of their classroom, you will find that approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of the children are overweight or obese. Of course, today, 70% of the community in the United States is overweight or obese. About 50% of the population is pre-diabetic, on their way to becoming diabetic. And so we have this, as you said, a pandemic of obesity. And where does the root of that? Unfortunately, is the toxins that are in our food. That's my humble perspective. And you can look at that because you could say, look, we've had food for many, many thousands of years, and we never had this problem. But nowadays, we use pesticides on our fruits and vegetables. We give hormones to the animals that we're eventually going to make it to our table. We give them antibiotics. We're continually under the eyes of a pharmaceutical industry that continues to say, you have a headache, here's a pill. You have a problem with a little bit of indigestion, here's a pill. And so we have this experience that I think emanates from the dysfunctionality of the food that most of us eat. Some of those challenges are associated with sugar. So if you look at the sugar industry from the 1950s and 60s, it just kind of went from here to here in terms of the consumption of sugar. Today, we kind of talk about the fact that most people have about an average of 150 pounds of sugar that they consume per year, and add to that another 150 pounds of white flour that they consume per year. So we're dealing with a society that has been indoctrinated to literally have an average of 300 pounds of sugar and white flour products. And of course, our children with the sodas, with the juices, as even though we think, oh, it's a juice, it's a good thing for you, it's full of a lot of dysfunctional sugars that create all kinds of inflammation that makes us pre-diabetic. And more importantly, it numbs our brain. It affects our physical body because it affects every single cell in our body. And so there's definitely an understanding that we now have globally. The reason that you're beginning to see the problem globally now is because we're basically exporting our dysfunctional foods to other countries, right? So if you look back into the historical past, you recognize that the people that lived in the rainforest, that lived in the indigenous populations, there was no heart disease, there was no dementia, there was no diabetes. They were living in harmony with the environment and with Mother Earth. We now buy everything that we buy. We go to the supermarket. As you know, people always say, go on the outskirts of the supermarket, don't go in the aisles that are in between, because the aisles that are in between is where all the foods that are dysfunctional are at. We want to maintain ourselves mostly with the fruits, the protein, the vegetables. But even so, the vegetables themselves are full of toxins because the Monsantos of the world have come to spray everything. And of course, now you have Bayer, who is the company that basically is a pharmaceutical company that basically helps make the Tylenol and has medications to treat the lymphomas or the leukemias. Well, guess what? Now they bought Monsanto, and so now here's the poison, and don't worry, I got the medicine for you. So they're basically in cahoots with that experience. And so what we're seeing is a progressive deterioration of our healthiness. And obesity is really a medical condition. It's a disease. It's an inflammatory condition. It's associated with diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancer. If a woman is 20 to 30 pounds of excess weight, their risk of developing breast cancer is 5 times that of somebody that is a normal, healthy weight. And so we recognize colon cancer, all types of different cancers are now associated with obesity. So we recognize that obesity is not just, I don't like the way I look in my pants, I don't like the way I fit. It's truly bringing attention to the livelihood that you will have as you continue to age. And of course, what is the traditional American way? Well, as you get older, you're going to see a doctor every 2 months. You're going to take an average of 3 to 5 different medications, and eventually you're going to forget your name. And eventually the system is going to have to take care of you and spend millions of dollars the last 6 months of your life in trying to maintain a livelihood that has no quality in it, right? And so we put all our resources into that area instead of putting our resources into education, into supporting, into helping people live a healthier life. And so there's a significant amount of perspectives that we can bring together. But I think in one nutshell is the quality of food and the toxins that are associated with the things that we put in our mouth that are creating the dysfunctionality within our bodies that we call obesity.
Absolutely. That was a lot. And you touched on different aspects, which made it so much digestible, because this is the one thing about health education. It's easy for you and I to sit here and talk in jargons, medical jargons, right? Then we turn to a patient who does not understand and either give them surface information or, regurgitate the same medical jargons. And then we expect that patient to be compliant. How do you explain something in a way that somebody gets it? It's like, oh my goodness, okay. So this is what it is. So thank you for that eloquent explanation as to what is going on. And you made a lot of great points. I'm curious, what really piqued your interest in going into bariatrics as a specialty?
So, I grew up in an immigrant family, eventually always had the vision to become a doctor. And through the blessings of the way that my life evolved, I was able to achieve that perspective. And so my first experience as a physician was as a board certified family doctor. And the board certification of a family doctor, the goal there was I wanted to deliver the babies, I wanted to take care of the children, wanted to take care of the grandmothers, wanted to be there for the families as the family doctor that could really help them. And I was blessed with being able to be very successful in developing a very busy practice that was very successful within the context of my community. And I was a family doctor. And then along the path of that journey, my mother one time came to visit me and said, Mijo, is there a pill that you can give me? Because I don't feel good, And I said, let me take a look at what you're taking, Mom. And so I had done my residency in Chicago. I now live in Florida. My mom was still living in Chicago, and she was being taken care of by physicians that I had respect for because I had learned from them or they were my colleagues when I did my residency back in Chicago. So she had what I would consider to be top line doctors, like I consider myself to be a top line doctor at that time. And as I started looking at my mom's blood test, everything looked normal. And then you look at the medication she's taking. She was taking a cholesterol pill, a diabetes pill, a blood pressure pill, all these different medications. And then it became obvious that the reason she didn't feel good was because she was taking all this stuff. And even though on paper, everybody was satisfied that she was controlled, nobody was actually fixing the original problem. Everybody was just adding to it. And it's not uncommon that you will find an aunt or a grandmother or a great aunt that goes to the doctor and everybody adds this pill. So that somebody gives this antidepressant, then somebody adds this blood pressure pill. Then she changes doctor or the doctor retires and the other doctor says, well, we'll keep those, but we'll add this. Before you know it, an individual is taking all these pills as if they were made by God and somehow or other they're going to miraculously heal. And so somewhere within the context of that experience, having had a success within the context of traditional medicine in family medicine and being very good at it, I'm a very good clinician, diagnostician, and was very good at helping people. But I came to realize that I wasn't really helping them. I was just putting Band-Aids on the problems. And evidence number one, or example number one, was my own mother, who, even though I wasn't directly taking care of her, every medicine she was taking, I was prescribing to all the patients that were in similar conditions to her. Mm-hmm. So this brought an opening of my eyes to realize that there's got to be a different way. And my intention was not just to be a doctor and to live a good life and to give people prescriptions for everything, but my intention was to really help them become healthy, help them regain their own essence, their own strength. And so that's when I woke up from the perspective of this dream that I was having where I wanted to be a doctor and save the world and realized that I wasn't saving anybody. I was just putting Band-Aids on everything. Mm-hmm. And then the understanding came to those words that many of us may have heard from our elders, and that is that you are what you eat, right? And you may have heard it from your mom, you may have heard it from your grandmother. This is a wisdom perspective that is long and old, but it has been forgotten. And so as soon as you started looking at that, I realized that if I can help my mom release those excess 50 pounds, she's not going to need the diabetes medicine. She's not going to need the cholesterol medicine. She's not going to need the blood pressure pills. She's going to feel significantly better. No more aches and pains, right? And so it was really out of love and intention to want to make the world better that I found the understanding that I could actually help people with all the conditions that I see in family medicine, but do it in a way that actually puts them in the driver's seat, that puts them in the position where they can actually regain their power back. And instead of expecting somebody to fix you, you actually can begin to address the problems yourself and begin to make those adjustments. And so my shift was from a board certified family doctor to then becoming a weight management expert and becoming a bariatric physician. And in that process, I've been able to help, I would say, 5,000 people minimum of what I've been able to do in my 15, 20 years as a bariatric or obesity specialist. In the last 15 years, I've been able to help improve the livelihoods of many thousands of people without necessarily adding more pills, but actually taking pills away and giving them the power to know that when they go to the supermarket, they have a choice. And if they make the right choices, they're going to have the benefits of those choices that they make for themselves. And the way to do that is to educate, motivate, and support. I mean, it's such a simple pattern, but many times, we don't allow ourselves to do that.
It's so simple that it is stupid, and you stand back and you're like, why is every healthcare provider of whatever capacity not doing this, right? We all got into healthcare to help, right? So why are we not educating our patients constantly? And even if we can't do that within the confines of the establishments that we work in, why are we not pulling in community resources to do that? Why are we not supporting our patients, right? Why are we not, doing the things that we know we really want to do to help? But I more and more people like yourself, Dr. Cesar, who have gone into the practice of medicine to help, and I've seen the disparities that do exist within the system, are stepping out to either specialize in integrative medicine or a holistic aspect of care so that impact can be made. So how much of obesity is psychological, would you say?
So when you say psychological, I'm imagining that you're bringing attention to the experience of stress. The word stress is a psychological experience. And so stress is real,
Yeah,
right?
stress and trauma.
Stress and traumas are
Yes.
definitely real. And I think that in the way that I practice medicine as a bariatric specialist, my number one thing that I do as you come into my practice to be evaluated and to be guided by me, the number one thing that I do is I want to hear your story. In other words, how did you get to be where you are today? And you're absolutely correct. Trauma, a lot of traumas, whether it's, issues of challenges with relationships, issues with their children, issues with work, issues with sexual abuse, issues with abuse, period. Sometimes something horrible happened, like, they got a divorce and all of a sudden the person ends up overeating and trying to sustain themselves in a different way, and they end up getting. And so, yes, I think from the psychological perspectives of our well-being are definitely interconnected. And I also think that sometimes when somebody's depressed, they will give you medications to try to adjust that experience of depression. But remember that the antidepressants are normally utilized, are called SSRIs, which is like the Zoloft's of the world or Prozacs of the world. And so those medications, when you come to a family doctor or an internist and you meet the criteria, I feel sad, so-and-so died, and I don't feel good, and I'm feeling depressed and anxious. Instead of us supporting them with community and maybe some counseling, we're very quick to go to the pill, right? And many times the person or the patient themselves is asking for a pill. Oh, my friend told me, I saw this commercial, I want that. The real issue is that serotonin, which is the happy molecule in our brain, the neurotransmitter, which the antidepressants are attempting to increase the volume of, they're increasing the volume of serotonin, not by making more serotonin, but by stopping the flow of serotonin. And so that way things don't flow out, so they continue to have higher levels. Well, that experience tends to be associated with increased weight. A lot of people that are actually on antidepressants are overweight. Because why? Because a lot of the antidepressants are weight positive medicine, which means that these medications are not only going to put a Band-Aid on your condition, because they're not getting to the root of the condition, they're just putting a Band-Aid on the symptomatology. But on top of that, they're going to give you the side effect of increasing weight. Of course, the experience of being under a lot of stress, where there's a lot of stress at home, a lot of stress at work, that tends to increase our cortisol levels. Our adrenal glands are pumping out all this cortisol. The cortisol increases our insulin resistance. And when it increases our insulin resistance, our body needs to make more insulin to get the job done. And insulin is the number one fat maker. So we have this recurrent challenge with stress. Not to mention that when you're under stress, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling depressed, what do? All of a sudden, the cookie looks good. The chips look good because they tend to give us a little something to make us feel good in that moment. But then obviously then we have to deal with guilt. We have to deal with frustration. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. I was doing so good for the first 5 days and now I blew my whole thing up. So forget it. And so stress is huge. So I do think that if you're asking me what is the relevance of mindset, I will call it mindset more than psychological problems, because I don't want to put somebody in a box and say, oh, the reason you're overweight is because something's psychologically wrong with you. You know, that would be a wrong approach. That would be a judgmental approach when I'm actually bringing back shame to that person because somehow or other.
Not necessarily like shaming the person, in mindset. I'm glad you mentioned it. The reason why I phrased that question that way was basically to get your expertise on the importance of bringing in somebody to help coach a person through that lifestyle change mindset, right? To identify what the root cause may be. You're talking about prescribing SSRIs for depressions, right? That is a band-aid for the root cause of what is having this person feel this way, right? It could have been a death in the family, divorce, like you said. It could be a parent of a teenager,
Yes.
right? That is going through whatever. Could it be loss of a job or, just being in a toxic work environment. It is always important to get to the root cause so that we know how to tailor a treatment plan.
Yes.
So that is why I asked that question in the way that I asked it, because otherwise we are just basically throwing things at the walls, just like we're throwing the medication,
Exactly.
because we're not getting to the root of it. What is going on so that we can have a better coach to help you work through those things, because it's all tools at the end of the day. We have to have tools to help us deal with life's challenges, because life is always going to life. There is no way you can escape life, because, the ebbs and flow of life is just that. However, if you have the appropriate tools to look at the cookie and say, you know what, you look good today. However, no. Right? You need that help, right? To
Yes.
identify your triggers and also to identify those things that really, lack of a better word, have you fall off the wagon, So that is why I asked that question that way. But
Yep.
thank you.
And for me, it's really that mindset that can actually that needs to be addressed and that needs to be empowered, because what we think we become, right? It's an ancient wisdom perspective. And many times I will have a person come in, maybe they're 220 pounds. Their goal is to be 150. That's their healthy weight. But it's not uncommon that I would hear something like, oh, if I can just be under 200, I'll be fine. I'm like, you're already setting limits on yourself and you're not having the confidence to say, no, I'm going to be 150 pounds. That's my good weight. I'm going to go ahead. I'm moving that direction. I'm going to talk to a doctor or a specialist in nutrition to make sure that I'm not being unrealistic in terms of what will be a healthy number for me. But assuming that's the healthy number, we kind of recognize how we set our own limits. You come to me, one of the things that many people will have is, and I used to be like that too. So it's not like I haven't experienced these things in my own skin. Bread, I mean, the bread that we make today has an average of 35 different ingredients. A real loaf of bread that we make at home may have 4 or 5, right? I mean, the traditional bread is very, and it's very nurturing. And at the same time, it's, people have been known for generations to have lived on bread and water, right? I mean, so there's a significant magic to the bread. But in today's world, many people is like, I can't do without the bread because I need my bread. Well, again, that's a mindset that needs to be addressed, because in order for you to achieve what you want, you need to be willing to let go of what no longer serves you, right? And so that means that, okay, the bread has been a good partner for me for all these years, but 50 pounds of excess weight, I need to make some changes. And so I need some guidance and some help. And so from my perspective, the mindset is key. An individual needs to be able to see themselves already having achieved what they want and begin to feel the joy of having achieved what they want before they even started, to create that dynamic of transformational experience where you actually actualize the life that you want, right? If we want this, but we don't think we can get it, guess what's going to happen? We're not going to get it because we're
That's
already
right.
setting ourselves in that direction. And so in the management of health in general, I think that we have been too quick in the Western traditional medicine that we have evolved to. Because once upon a time, we had in the pharmacies, they were not the CVSs of today. They were actually compound pharmacies. And so you could go talk to the pharmacist in the days of your grandmother. She can go talk to the pharmacist and they could create something. But then everything started being made by the pharmaceutical industry. And so you just had these retail stores that were considered the pharmacies, but the pharmacies weren't making anything. They were just giving you what they were buying. And so all of a sudden you have a transactional business that basically makes money on us being sick. And so the more we consume, the more sicker we are, the more money that the system is creating. So there's a imbalance there. I think it's important for us to bring back the mindset that I have the power to achieve what I want. I just have to be willing to let go of what no longer serves me. And then you step into your power. You begin to change your dynamics of how you eat. You release the excess weight. All of a sudden, your brain is now functioning optimally because it's not full of numbing stuff that it's making you not think clearly, that's making you feel anxious, that's making you feel frustrated. In other words, toxic emotions, right? The flight or fight response, it's no longer there. Now you're feeling a little bit more calm. You have more clarity. Now you can step into the reason why you're alive to begin with, which is to be of service to something that's bigger than you.
I absolutely love that. So when when we talk about pharmaceuticals, I had a pharmacist on, and there are pharmacists that are still willing to help. However, we are in the age of a one size fit all approach where things are no longer tailored to a person, right? So you're talking about, the days of your grandmother, she was able to go to somebody and talk about her symptoms. And, I'm sure with those symptoms communication, there was communication about onset, exacerbating factors that make it go down, and something was tailored to fit that. However, when you go into a pharmacy today and pick up Tylenol from the shelf, it's the same Tylenol for everybody, right?
Yep. Yep.
So there is this need for us to really take into consideration a makeup, because we're not a monolith, right? And healthcare has been fashioned in that way to treat us all as a monolith. You can even see that in drug research, where there's really a big lack of representation when it comes to that, research phase of things. And a lot of that distrust comes from history, right? The history of atrocities that were committed. However, there is still a need to be transparent. And more people, I don't know if you see this in your practice, but more and more people are starting to revert to naturopathic way of healing, right? Because of, talking about the band-aids that no longer work, right? More
Yes.
people are going back to utilizing plants, utilizing vitamins, minerals. Magnesium is a big one, right? To heal and to balance, not to be jargony, everybody, but homeostasis, to maintain balance in their body, as opposed to having these peaks that have very dangerous effect in the body. So when it comes to treatment, given that you've identified that we have this one size fit all approach, in addition to getting to know your patient by telling them to tell you about their stories, right? Do you also use DNA differentiation when it comes to meal planning and activity? Because I find a lot of people in the health and wellness, I don't want to call it an industry because it makes it industrialized, it's space, in the health and wellness space, are now utilizing DNA differentiation to be able to tailor meals because people are more sensitive than others to certain things. Like, we have gluten, we have the 550 ingredients in a loaf of bread as opposed to egg, flour, salt and yeast,
Yes.
right? And water. So
Yeah.
do you utilize like a DNA sensitivity or a DNA testing? Is usually like with saliva to be able to plan your patient's care, or does it depend on the history that you're able to take from that patient?
So the majority of it really depends on the history, and
Okay.
I try not to do too many things that are like genetic profiles.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, as part of my journey, I am not only a certified physician, as you brought attention to, in terms of bariatrics, family medicine. I'm also a specialist in advanced hormone optimization and being able to manage hormones from that level. But I'm also a shaman. And so as a shaman, I actually understand energy. Okay. And so, the understanding of genetics is that less than 2 or 3% of all the conditions that are out there are truly genetically predisposed. And so that means that the other 97% of the circumstances that are out there that are occurring are really due to what's called epigenetics, right? That's the key, right? It's not the genes that you were born with, but it's which genes you're going to turn on once you begin to live the life, right? So it's epigenetics. So that brings attention to the environment. That brings attention the environment that is your cells are living around, which has to do with whatever nutrients you're putting into your body or whatever toxins you're putting into your body. But it also brings attention to the experience of emotions, okay? Because the emotions that you're experiencing are going to eventually bring forth different conditions, because emotions are connected to frequency, they're connected to the environment. And so if you're not loving yourself, your cells themselves are not in a love environment. If they're not in a love environment, diseases will be common, because you're now giving the power to dysfunctional things to begin to become alive. And so from my perspective, it's really about the epigenetics, and I try not to poison people's perspective by giving them the idea that, oh my God, your genetics says that you might have colon cancer one day. Your thing says that you may have this, because now what have I done? I just seeded you with the idea that you're going to get something. And if we truly believe in the concept of what we think we become, which I am a prime believer in that, I just seeded in you that this will happen to you. And so I am very careful in my words. What I do focus on with my patients is basically the understanding of we need to bring love back into our own relationship with ourselves, with food, with our body, right? It's not uncommon that I would hear a woman, and sometimes a man, but it's more common in a woman because of just the way that we tend to judge women based on their body more than we do men. It's okay for men to have a gut. That means he's successful. But if a woman has a gut, what's wrong with her, right? So understanding that perspective is not uncommon for a woman to come and says, can you just cut this fat off? I hate my fat. I hate my stomach. So right there in the concept of that story perspective, I know where the problem lies intuitively, right? The problem is this individual doesn't really love themselves, doesn't appreciate themselves, doesn't yet understand that the fat cells are part of the whole totality of who she was. The creator, when they made us, or when he made us or she made us, was truly created fat cells as part of that integrity of the body. So the fat cells are not bad. We just created a disease fat cell condition, which is called obesity. So the intention should be, how do we bring those cells now back into balance? How do we bring them back into health, rather than suck it off? Let's do liposuction. Let's cut it off. Because then what we're doing is we're unloving and trying to get rid of something that is us, right? And so there's a dysfunctionality that I sense in a lot of patients that are seeking help in the world of obesity management, because nobody's picking up on the fact that part of the primary problem why they keep losing those 40 pounds just to regain the 45 pounds again, and they do this yo-yo over and over and over again, because nobody has really given attention to them that basically says, hey, the challenge here is not that you cannot achieve releasing 50 pounds. The challenge is how you're going to maintain it. And the reality is that in order for you to achieve what you want, you got to let go of what no longer serves you. So what do you need to let go? You need to let go of the judgment for yourself, because you're continually judging yourself like you don't look good, you're not good enough, you're feeling all this pressure, and then you hate your body. You don't even want to show it to your partner, your intimate partner, because you got to turn the lights off because you don't feel comfortable in your own skin. That is a real issue. That's the essence of the problem. And if we don't address it, then the person will drop the weight once they follow the diet. But the diet is a 4-letter word that I don't like to use, because it's really, life should be about abundance and about a balance. My goal is not to, as we start the journey and you stop eating bread, you stop eating rice, you stop eating the pasta, and you start eating healthier and you get your body back into synchronicity. My goal is not for my patients to never have a piece of pizza, to never have ice cream, to never have cheesecake, to never have a piece of bread. What I do is I help them become more choosy. If you're going to have a piece of bread, it better be from that New York bakery that makes the best bread, or it better be my grandmother's bread, or so you create that balance of understanding. And more importantly, you limit it to a certain amount. So I call it the 80-20 rule. 20% of the time, you enjoy life in its purest form without any restrictions. And the other 80%, you eat your veggies, you eat your veggies, you eat your veggies, you eat your protein, you exercise, you meditate. And so you begin to shift your understanding of this temple we call the body, right? Because we're spiritual beings in a physical experience. And so when we come to appreciate that, then we begin to appreciate the vehicle that we have been gifted with. And how do we optimize that vehicle so that we can be the best that we could be during this journey in this lifetime?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cesar. So I want to talk about your method. Please let us know the one thing that you utilize to help people, in addition to all of these things, these beautiful things that you stated. The one thing that you're known for, Dr. Cesar.
So from a nutritional perspective, the primary nutrition, or the two, I used to say the pink elephant in the room, but there's actually two pink elephants in the room that we tend to, two of them, okay? And the first pink elephant in the room we brought attention to already, and that is the sugars, the sugar industry. Everything has sugar, right? And so people don't realize that even at Cheerios, the box of Cheerios, it'll say sugar-free, and not sugar-free. It'll say no added sugar.
Yeah.
It's just like me telling you, oh, honey, there's no added sugar, but it's all sugar, right? So the understanding is that this influx of growth of the sugar industry, it came about to some extent because back in the 70s, I think under the Eisenhower time, they decided through some vision that was completely erroneous that fat was bad for you. And so they basically started going with the low fat. But if you take the fat, that's what gives flavor to the food, and that's what gives us satiety. So if we no longer are able to decrease, to use fat, that's where the sugar industry all of a sudden has the subsidies to create all these sugars so that we can end up creating. And so we had this obesity epidemic that just went off the roof. So one of the pink elephants is we need to cut back on the sugars, and every carbohydrate is a sugar. So we need to be choosy. You can eat lots and lots of vegetables, and when you get tired of eating vegetables, you can eat more vegetables. Why? Because the glycemic index of vegetables is relatively low. So that means that you can eat a lot of vegetables without adding a lot of sugar into your system. Yeah. But you start adding fruits, you start adding the mangoes, you start adding the watermelons, you start adding a lot of the fruits that we have. Even though they're healthy and they're good for you, you need to monitor your sugar intake. And of course, every piece of bread, every piece of pasta, every piece of rice, the chippies, the cookies, the crackers, all of those things are just basically made of sugar. So this is one of the primary challenges, because as we increase our sugar, our body needs to increase the insulin so that it can take care of that sugar increase. And so before you know it, we begin to become less able to bring that sugar down. And so we need to make more insulin. And again, The insulin is the number one fat maker. So in diabetics, that's why a lot of them type 2 diabetics are obese, because they have insulin resistance in a major way. So their body's overproducing insulin. And what do we do with diabetics historically? When their sugar is not being controlled, we put them on insulin. So now they get even bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're just maintaining a normal sugar while we're creating all this inflammation into the body, because the insulin is also the number one inflammatory hormone in our body, which creates inflammation, creates heart disease, we need it for survival at low levels. But when it becomes high, it becomes a part of a major problem. So sugar is definitely one of the areas where nutritionally I educate my patients on decreasing and making changes to what they eat. Number two, it's the famous seed oils. Mm-hmm. Seed oils are on everything. Seed oils, you're talking about the canolas of the world. Remember that once upon a time they said, oh, you shouldn't eat butter, you should eat margarine. Well, margarine is bad for you, right? And so when people go out to eat a lot, they don't realize that the places that they're eating from, even though it tastes good, all of them are using seed oils to give flavor to the sauces, to give flavor to the different dishes that they're creating. And so seed oils decrease our mitochondrial health. So it makes our mitochondria become dysfunctional. It creates inflammation. And between those two is the perfect storm. And so currently, every restaurant uses seed oils. And every restaurant or non-restaurant, because even at home, we're eating too many sugars. So the intention is, how do we get ourselves back into balance? And that is eat more vegetables, some healthy proteins. By healthy proteins, I'm talking about eggs, but that come from happy chickens. A happy chicken is one that lived out in the yard, that was out there, that maybe ate little bugs here and there, that was being fed, with love and with understanding. That's going to have a healthy egg. But the majority of our eggs for the industry is coming from cages that hold 20 chickens. They're injected with antibiotics. They're injected with steroids to plump them quickly and get them to market. And those unfortunate chickens have suffered their whole life. So what does that mean in terms of the cortisol that they bring, in terms of the energy that we're eating? Remember that everything is energy. And if we eat dysfunctional energy, we inherit that. We are what we eat. So we are those dysfunctional elements that we eat. And so it's important then to begin to understand what creates a healthy protein. And so the only understanding there is, where does the food come from? Where did this piece of steak come from? Was it grass-fed? Did it come from an environment where love? And so if we can begin to connect the dots of where does the food come from that we're putting in our table, we can begin to bring that forth. And the other thing is really an understanding of gratitude. It's so easy for us, especially in the busy world, to be doing our computer and eating a sandwich at the same time, or shoving our food in because we only got 10 minutes. Food is a sacred experience. We need to bring the sacred back into our lives, and it comes from the food, right? Pachamama, our Mother Earth, is here to support us, to nurture us. Every single cell in our body, where does it come from? It comes from Mother Earth, right? And yet we developed this understanding that bacteria are bad. Bacteria are bad. We got over trillions of bacteria in our gut. And 90% of Yep. And 90% of the serotonin that our brain needs is coming from the gut bacteria. So we have to shift the understanding of relationships, get ourselves back into a balanced perspective. So my program focuses a lot on education, focuses a lot on holding people accountable. So it's a weekly program. So you come every week, you get measured, you get counseled, you get encouraged, you get supported. You had a good week, we're your best cheerleaders. If you had a challenging week, we're here to talk about it, to kind of encourage you for the next week. So it's not easy to change perspectives. It's not easy to change mindsets, right? Because when we go into the real world, everybody else is doing that. At the office, people are having the donuts. At the office, people are having the pizzas. At the birthday, the this, the that. So when we go into the real world, we have to know how to navigate our own intentions and our own self. So nutrition is key. Some of the areas that I also use in combination with helping my patients change their lifestyle, which is the sustainable way to achieve success and maintain success, right? It's not a quick pill. It's not the semaglutide that you're going to inject and it's going to drop you. These are tools, okay, that if used appropriately as a way to help ourselves change your lifestyle, they can be helpful. But if you're thinking that this thing's going to fix you, the pharmaceutical company loves you because they don't think of curing anything. They think of, man, this stock is continuing to go up because now we have all these people on semaglutide, and next year our goal is to have twice as many people on semaglutide. So we're never getting rid of the condition. We're just now have an influx of stuff of money that is being produced because more people are needing it. My intention is not to be dependent on anything outside, but to connect with Mother Earth, connect with your own essence, and begin to shift your perspectives and begin to walk life differently in a more healthier way. And so nutrition is key, support is key, encouragement is key. I use tools like mantras. If you are what you think you become, then why don't we come up with some thoughts, some ideas that will make sense to what I want to be, to how I want to step. So I use things like, I am 150 pounds. I am a size 7. I mean, a size 8. I am healthy. I am strong. I am loving. I mean, in other words, bring into the understanding of that mindset the programs that we want to download into our subconscious that will then naturally keep us in that frame of work, instead of having the downloads that we received as children or that we received as adults as we have grown that don't really belong to us. So we need to honor ourselves and realize that we have the ability to make miracles, and we are a miracle walking. So how can we activate that miracle of becoming so that we can evolve to become the best that we could be? And then as far as interesting tools that are a lot more holistic in nature, but at the same time provide effective outcomes, is the therapy with the low-level green laser, okay? And this is a laser therapy that literally will target the abdomen. And it's not like cool sculpting. Cool sculpting, the intention with cool sculpting is to kill the fat cells, right? Let's destroy those suckers. I hate them. They don't belong in me. I want to get rid of them, which is very counterintuitive for me because that's just creating more problems. And we have seen what the cool sculptings of the world have done for people. They actually have, you realize that the FDA approved it for improving the appearance of fat. It didn't approve it for the decrease of fat, and it's only approved by the FDA for treatment in people that have a BMI of less than 30, less than, I think it's even 28. In other words, they have to be healthy. If they have a little love handle, that might do it. But they're using it, or historically they were using it on people that were 50 pounds of excess weight, that had a BMI of 32, 36, 38, right? Again, it's a market issue. The difference between the Emerald low-level laser is that it's a low-frequency laser, so it doesn't burn, it doesn't cool you. It's just a frequency that is being pointed in the area of, let's say, the abdomen, where there's excess weight. As the low-level laser comes through the skin and it touches a fat cell, it creates multiple microscopic pores inside on the fat cell surface. Now, the fat cell who's sick and it's engorged, all of a sudden begins to shrink because it's just like puncturing a balloon. All the stuff that's inside the fat cell begins to seep out into the extracellular field. In the extracellular field, it gets connected to the lymphatics of the body, which is the drainage system of the body. And the drainage system takes all these excess calories, excess toxins, takes it into the lymphatic system, and then eventually goes to the liver and gets rid of it from the body through the different mechanisms that the body has. So it's a magical in its appearance because you literally have an engorged fat cell, and what you're doing is making microscopic pores that then are going to shrink that fat cell so that it's empty of all those dysfunctional continents. And guess what the miracle of life is is even more profound. Those little microscopic holes, the body heals them within 5 days. So now you're not walking around with fat cells that have holes in them. You actually are walking around with healthy fat cells that repair those little holes, that are now empty of all those excess chemicals that were in there. And you can begin to then see the difference between I dropped an inch, I dropped 2 inches. Now, is it sustainable? I can shrink you to to 2 sizes smaller. Can you maintain that? That depends on you, right? So if you just want a quick fix and you want to get into that dress, yes, the Emerald can do that for you in within 2 or 3 weeks of doing 2 or 3 treatments a week. You can get into that dress and go to that wedding. But if you really want to be able to maintain that, you need to have changed something in yourself. Right. You cannot continue to eat the way you were eating and treat yourself the way you were treating yourself and expect that as you shrink through this advanced technology, that now the body's just going to stay there. It's going to stay there if you have changed your ways. And so again, part of my whole intention is to bring a holistic approach to the field of releasing excess weight. And notice that I use the word release as opposed to lose, because even at the level of our verbalization of things, if we lose something, it's going to find us back or we're going to find it back, right? And so you want to let it go. You want to release it. You don't want to lose it, because by definition, we're thinking that we need to find it again. And so it's all connected to our understanding of the mindset, our understanding of our love relationship to ourselves, to the food that we eat, beginning to make better choices and utilize state-of-the-art technology to help us maximize our ability to shrink those fat cells, but step into a maintenance where we can begin to actually move that needle forward.
Beautiful. The one thing that comes to mind is that the toxins are released into the interstitial cellular space, right?
Yes.
That goes into the lymphatic system. Is there a lymphatic drainage treatment that goes with that, and also support with hydration? Because I'm just from the thought of it, the fat cells hold a lot. And we know that these are toxins, and we're releasing this toxin at a high amount at the same time into the body. So is there support to basically flush the toxins out right after the process?
So definitely water is key. So definitely drinking, ideally we want them to drink a gallon of water a day, but we can accept a half a gallon. Some people have a harder time drinking fluids or drinking water than others. So between half a gallon to a gallon is recommended. And you're definitely correct in that it needs to be flushed out, because now you have it into the body. The other part about it, the lymphatics, is that yes, lymphatic massages are definitely helpful. Every time we do a treatment, we have a high power 2-hand holder of a massager, like an electrical massager, that we kind of utilize on the patients so that we can literally milk the fat cells, right? In other words, we need to now get them to milk and kind of move things in the direction where the larger blood vessels are at, so that you can take that into the liver and get rid of it through the different mechanisms that the body has. And if somebody has the means or the time or the ability, we always recommend that if they have the opportunity to do a lymphatic massage every other week or once a week, depending on their circumstances, it definitely makes a big difference, because you're literally milking it and getting that all those toxins out of the body through that process.
Okay, beautiful. Good to know. So when it comes to maintenance, you talked about food, and that's one of the pink elephants, right? And we know that sugar is very insidious in the way it is eaten in food. The one surprise that I got from patients when I did diabetes education was milk, right? A lot of people do not know that milk is carbohydrate and there's a lot of sugar hidden there.
Yes.
Another aspect was condiments, right? Ketchup, even mustard. So what are the guidelines that you have for your patients about maybe educating themselves on the labels, when it comes to making food choices, and how can we navigate? Because again, not everybody has the means to shop organic, to buy the grass-fed, the free-range chicken, the free-range chicken eggs, and everything along those lines, right? How can a person who has a limited income and who really does want to make a difference in their eating habits and, their overall health, right, navigate these hurdles that unfortunately do exist in the society?
Mm-hmm. So there's some good writings and that all of your listeners can Google. It's called the Dirty Dozen
Mm-hmm.
and the Clean 15. And that gives you an understanding of, like, in the Dirty Dozen, it brings attention to the fruits that have the highest amounts of pesticides. Believe it or not, it's the strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
Strawberry is the highest amounts of pesticides. And at the level of the greens, the highest amounts of pesticides are in the spinach and kale. So the two superfoods that we tend to think are good for you are also the ones that tend to have the most amounts of pesticides. And then there's other ones that are called the clean 15. Asparagus are part of that. Mushrooms are part of that. And so you could definitely navigate by learning to eat certain vegetables more than others if you're on a budget and you cannot afford organically grown food. When it comes to the protein aspects of things, obviously that's a little bit more difficult because a chicken is not the same as a chicken. And if you can only afford this kind of a chicken, then there's not a lot that you could do outside of that. So I believe that you have the ability as a human being to convert anything that you put in your mouth into a positive experience in your body if you bring grace to that food. And so this is where the understanding needs to come in, that we as individuals have the power to change the experience that we're having. So once upon a time, I heard a story about the Dalai Lama. I think he went to visit somebody and they went ahead and they ended up killing, I think it was a little lamb in honor of him. In other words, this is truly something that some societies will kill the best thing that they've had for the last 6 months to
Right.
honor this individual. Well, he's vegetarian. Does that mean that he says, no, that's not good enough for me because it's bad for my body? No, he prayed over it and ate it just like it was anything else. And so I think that I don't want to overemphasize. Definitely, we need to understand where the food comes from and we need to make the best choices possible. But nothing can replace the power that you have when you connect and you ask the food to bless you. You ask the food to give you strength. You ask the food to give you health. And before you can ask for that, you need to first be grateful for where it comes from. So even if it comes from the dirtiest part of the world, there were people that were actually being employed and sustaining families because of that. There was a truck driver that needed to drive that food someplace. There was a store that actually sustaining employees, sustaining a family by being able to sell these products, right? And so if we can understand the richness of even the things that are not ideal for us, we can actually convert it. But that's talking now metaphysically and not scientifically. From a scientific perspective, we understand that some of these chickens, unfortunately, are full of steroids, full of antibiotics. They're more likely going to have an effect in your gastric biome. So you're going to have dysfunctional bacteria that will then begin to make you more hungry for more of those dysfunctional foods. And therefore, they're going to eventually create disease. So we do understand scientifically that there's no way around it. In the vegetables and fruits, there's definitely evidence to support that certain fruits or vegetables, it's okay for you to buy them non-organic. You just have to know how to shop. When the protein, I think it's just a matter of don't overeat too much protein. And whenever possible, try to go with high quality protein. But if you're exposed to a circumstance where that's all you can afford and that's how you feed your children, then realize that you have a very powerful ability to transform food by just putting your hands and doing grace over it. And this is not religious, it's spiritual.
And also their practices, just to add to that, some people do with their foods, especially with the dirty dozen. People are soaking in vinegar, baking soda, and things of that nature to get that surface, tension off the fruits. Also, people practice that with protein as well. as opposed to just eating it right out of the pack. People are washing and soaking their meat with vinegar or citrus just to, get
Yes.
what as much as they possibly can get out of that food using salt in that cleaning experience. So do the best that you can and bless it and believe that it's going to work in your body the
Yes.
way that it can. That is not to say, okay, just avoid everything. Don't ever eat strawberries ever in your life unless it's organic.
Right.
That is not it. If you can spend time and really clean it with vinegar, baking soda, whatever it is that you have to go through to get that gunk off as much as you can, please. Socioeconomically, not everybody can afford organic food.
And another little part to add to that
Yeah.
is we tend to microwave everything, right? Well,
Oh,
microwave kills everything, right? And so we really need to recognize that it takes a little longer. Put the leftovers inside a pan and warm them up the more traditional way, rather than just putting 30 seconds in the microwave and being ready to go. Because what we're doing is we're taking all the goodness that there is and just killing it, right? So
yes, that part. So microwave is basically radiation, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're zapping the nutrients. But I mean, whatever works for you works for you.
yes.
It takes a lot to make a change. It takes a lot. Lifestyle change is not easy. That's why that mindset is important. So, but the education is there, and we're here to talk about it. And if it's beneficial to you, apply whatever you've heard. So, Dr. Cesar, let's just go back just a tad. Just a little bit. Why do you think that I know this, but why do you think that when it comes to a lot of weight management or weight release, like you put it, concern are very heavy within among women than there are men? Yes, part of this is societal, and the other part is also like not genetics, but our makeup, the way we're built, the way we store fat, right? For
Yes.
instance. So, is there anything else that maybe you found in your years of practice that has been like a reoccurring theme?
You were bringing attention to women are different than men, and we tend to see more distribution in fat distribution in women that is different. So to bring attention to that, an average of 20% body fat in men is considered to be healthy, right? Anything less than that. Percentage of body fat and a female, depending on the breast size, could be 35, right? And so because the breast and the curves that a woman has are all thanks to these beautiful fat cells that are kind of contouring that experience. So yes, men and women are different. So woman naturally has a lot more fat than a man when they're both healthy. I think that in general, the part about we were talking about the society, that society says, oh, if a man has a gut, he's successful, that kind of thing. When you extrapolate it to the internal part of it, I find that a lot more women tend to be less loving of themselves, less appreciative of themselves. The traditional woman who is overweight, has 3 kids at home, plus her husband, usually has a full time job. She's still following the protocols of whatever she was brought up with, where, I got to clean the house, I got to do this, I got to do that. When the child is sick, typically, not that it doesn't happen, but typically it's not the father that stays home with the child. It's typically the mother that's there to support it, because the maternal love, right? That maternal essence, that divine aspect of the feminine spirit is so nurturing and so loving that it's continually putting itself out to the world. And so many times I tend to look at the experiencing woman, where I tell them, you're like the caboose. Everybody comes first and you're at the end. You can only continue to give tea from your cup for so long before you become empty.
Right.
So there's got to be opportunities for you to fill that cup with appreciation, compassion, and love for yourself, so you can continue to fill the cups of everybody else. So I do think that I tend to experience more of my female patients that tend to have overwhelming lifestyles that are preventing them from stepping into what they wish they could do. Okay. While the man tends to be like the 9 to 5, he comes home, he'll help out around the house, he'll do this, he'll do that. Doesn't mean that it's like that 100% of the time. There are definitely areas where it's completely shifted. But I think that we're still living under that understanding where a woman basically is taking care of the child, the husband, the kitchen, cleaning the bathrooms, making sure that all the sheets are clean. And on top of that, taking the kids to school, talking to the teacher, So there's still an understanding that a woman tends to have a lot more of those responsibilities than the male in our society.
Not surprised at all, but thank you. That's your perspective on everything that we've talked about has been very insightful and great. So for everybody listening, thank you for listening. Please let us know what you think. Dr. Cesar, everything about Dr. Cesar is going to be in the show notes, his website, his offers, his services. So if you listen to this podcast and you're interested in reaching out, please do reach out, consult with him, and learn on your own if you cannot. But again, this is a person that is a resource. He's a specialist. This is what he does. And please do reach out and consult. So for Dr. Cesar, for people that are around the world who may not be in immediate proximity to you, who may want to work with you or benefit from your program, what can those people do?
So we do have a virtual program that we have developed. And so if somebody was interested and lived in New York, that doesn't live in the Tampa Bay area, which is where my practices are at, let's say they live in New York or California or Chicago or another other states, they could definitely reach us through our phone number, and we will then potentially help them through what's called a virtual program, which is where we begin the process of educating, motivating, have the weekly visits, have the understanding, do the blood test. Even though you're not in my office, I send the prescription so you can get the blood test done. So basically, because the integrity of the program is to first and foremost make sure that we understand your health. And a lot of people, even though their doctor told them their thyroid is totally normal, it's actually not working optimally. And so there's little details that the blood test will bring attention to. Of course, there is the understanding of their life experience and the stressors and the challenges and all of that. And that we work with virtually. And we have a follow-up every week. And so we do have a virtual option for those that have a hard time getting to the office. Okay.
So what if somebody's interested in the emerald treatment? How is that going to be fashioned into their treatment virtually?
So with the emerald treatment is definitely something that the person needs to be nearby, right? Mm-hmm. But the way that we basically have the ability to, somebody needs a transformational experience, they will then be doing what's called our awakening program, which is our holistic approach where we give you supplements to upgrade your gastric biome, upgrade your brain function, detoxify the body. So we have a very state-of-the-art, evidence-based, scientific proven nutritional plan with supplements that we will be integrating so that because the understanding is if we give the body what it needs, the body will heal itself, right? So all we need to do is provide it what it needs, and then the body will do the magic. And now in those individuals that are nearby, they can definitely do that awakening program and do the Form Novel at the same time so that they maximize their ability to shrink those fat cells quicker while integrating a new holistic understanding and giving the body what it needs so that it can prosper and heal itself quicker. We also have programs where somebody says, I just want to do the Form Novel because I want to I'm not the Form Novel, the Emerald, because I have this double chin and I want to get rid of it. I have arms that have bat wings and I want to kind of have a little bit better contouring for that. I have love handles, so we have people that are coming in purely for the emerald therapy because wherever there's fat, this technology can shrink that fat. But when somebody has 50 pounds of excess weight, we always recommend that they actually, in addition to the emerald, they also begin to do a nutritional guidance and support system because ultimately it's not just about shrinking, but about maintaining that shrinkage through the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
And we call that total body. That the total body is when you have the awakening, which is the educational, nutritional portion of it, and you're also doing the light therapy to begin to have significant changes quicker rather than later.
So it is safe to, I don't want to assume anything. So this treatment that actually leads to optimal health or a healthy pathway, I'm taking is not covered by insurance. It has to be private pay.
Yes. You're absolutely correct. Unfortunately, our insurance system only covers it's a sick health kind of coverage, right? So they will pay for your bypass of the heart. Mm-hmm. They might even pay for your gastric bypass. But if you're talking about education and transformational, so that you can be healthy, there's unfortunately, the insurance companies are not in it for that.
Got it. So. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You heard it from Dr. Cesar himself. We are going to reiterate all of this in the show notes so you know how to get in touch with him, reach out to him, consult. It doesn't hurt to get more information. It doesn't hurt to educate yourself or to explore your options, right? We are all on this journey to try to be healthy. Life does get stressful. However, there are ways to get healthier even in the midst of you managing so much. Education is key. And with Dr. Cesar, you not only have education, you have support. I mean, what else can you ask for?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cesar. This was awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourself and be healthy. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.